homage to Buddha Shakyamuni, homage to Manjushri, homage to all the lineage masters. The supreme, profound and subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate beings, please generate bodhicitta before teaching. Next, let's continue our study of the Bodhicharyavatara, Ocean of Good Explanations. We are now on the branch of confession in the second chapter. Within the branch of confession, we are now discussing the four powers. The first, the power of regret, is explained in two parts. The first point has already been covered. Now we are discussing confessing specific negative actions in relation to supreme objects. The verse says, I have, because of the afflictions, caused harm with body, speech, and mind to the three jewels, and to my parents, and to the gurus, among others. The meaning here is that as sentient beings since beginningless time, we have often acted under the influence of afflictions, ignorance, and the three poisons, desire, anger, and ignorance. Driven by these afflictions, we have used our body, speech, and mind to cause harm to those very special objects, what we often call the field of merit, such as the supreme merit of three jewels, or our parents, who have given us the immeasurable kindness of raising and nurturing us throughout our lives, or our gurus, who have given us the precious Dharma and whose kindness is as great as a mountain, as well as any other sentient beings. We have at times committed various negative actions in relation to them. In other words, as we all know, the three jewels are the most important objects of respect in this world. Since beginningless time in this world, we have sometimes lost control and given rise to afflictions, sometimes due to ignorance, or when desire, anger, and ignorance become very strong for all sorts of reasons, we have at times even committed harmful actions toward the three jewels. For example, some people, out of anger, have physically attacked members of the Sangha, or verbally slandered them, or generated wrong views or malice in their minds. In front of our parents, the three jewels, our gurus, and other sentient beings. If we have committed very serious negative actions with body, speech, and mind, then as a result, we will inevitably experience the suffering of the lower realms, being reborn as a hell being or a hungry ghost. We may have created a great deal of such negative karma. Each of us, ideally, should be very respectful to the three jewels, but sometimes in our practice, have we always maintained respect for the three jewels? This is not always easy. Sometimes, under the influence of afflictions, whether intentionally or unintentionally, we have often committed many negative actions. Some people, even toward their own parents, who should be respected and to whom we should be deeply filial, not only fail to repay their deep kindness, but sometimes even treat them disrespectfully, lacking the proper gratitude they deserve. Nowadays, many people in society may sometimes treat their parents disrespectfully or even harshly. Sadly, this kind of behavior is not rare at all. In addition toward our own root gurus, or those gurus who have bestowed us the supreme Dharma, we should also show our respect. But in our practice, we may sometimes criticize or develop wrong views toward them. This does happen. The consequences of these negative actions can be quite serious. Each of us should often reflect on ourselves during our practice. We should look within and ask ourselves, if we examine our own spiritual journey, we may easily discover that in daily life we have sometimes made these kinds of grave mistakes. In other words, we have sometimes gone against the teachings of the Buddha and our gurus. I, who am wicked and am stained by numerous failings, have committed misdeeds that are most terrible. Before the guides, I confess them all. Because of the karma we have accumulated in the past, we have committed many of the negative actions just described, such as slandering or physically harming these most supreme and worthy objects of respect. We have committed many such negative actions. As practitioners, we may feel that we have accumulated a lot of negative karma. These negative actions are not easily forgiven, even by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Such negative actions are very hard to pardon. But now, I have a precious opportunity. I must confess sincerely before Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and all the lineage gurus. I must confess with complete sincerity. I must confess with deep regret and a profound sense of shame. I must confess thoroughly and openly with all all my heart and repent for each one with deep remorse. If we do not confess in this way, then, as mentioned before, it will be very difficult to free ourselves from the suffering of samsara or the lower realms. But if we diligently confess, we will definitely move toward liberation and attain ultimate freedom. According to the teachings of the scriptures, confession is extremely necessary. For example, in the Sutra of Golden Light it is said, all the serious negative actions I have committed in the past should be confessed before the Buddha, who possesses the 10 powers. The Sutra of Golden Light also says, when we confess, it should not be just superficial or verbal. We must confess with true sincerity and genuine intention. In the past, when the great Chan master Baizhang was serving as the incense master in the monastic community, one time he got up late in the morning. He was about 5 minutes late. He felt deep regret. In front of the Buddha statue, he took up the discipline stick and confessed from his heart. He thought, even though I was only 5 minutes late, with so many hundreds of monks in the monastery, if you add up all the time lost, it's a huge amount. He sincerely confessed from his heart. Later on, there were also many instructions from Master Baizhang, specifically on the subject of confession, guiding practitioners on how to properly repent their misdeeds. So we as Dharma practitioners, when we encounter these supreme objects, have we ever committed negative actions? Most likely yes, including toward our own parents, our gurus, the 3 jewels, and many other sentient beings, whether they have benefited us or not. If we have committed especially serious negative actions, then now we should try to confess. According to the stories and biographies of some great masters, no matter what it takes, even if it means using your own body or even sacrificing your very life, it is worth it to confess by any means possible. In the biographies of the 84 great Mahasiddhas, there are also such stories. Recently, I also mentioned, for example, there was a lay person whose guru was a monastic. This person was a lay practitioner, and his guru was an ordained monk. The guru would often advise him to give up all the trivial matters of this world and go to a solitary place to practice single-pointedly. But he thought to himself, maybe my guru is jealous of me, because I am now very wealthy and have abundant financial resources, and perhaps my guru cannot accept this situation. The guru kept telling him, you must give up worldly concerns and practice the Dharma earnestly. You must see through the illusions of the world. But he never listened. Finally, he seemed to awaken and began to reflect deeply on his own mind, realizing that all worldly affairs are meaningless. So he let go of all worldly affairs and devoted himself wholeheartedly to practice. He practiced with all his heart, but still did not receive any signs or spiritual experiences. One night, his yidam appeared in a dream and told him, you have gone against your guru's instructions. Now you must confess your faults. If you do not confess, you will never attain any realization in this lifetime. He then asked, what kind of confession should I do? The yidam told him, if you truly want to confess, the best way is to cut off all your limbs as an act of confession. You should confess in this way. He actually did this. And after cutting off his limbs, he confessed with great diligence. Because he had gone against his guru's instructions, he did not attain realization in this life, but in the bardo, he attained realization. Of course, when we hear this story, some of us might feel a sense of fear or unease and may think that such acts of confession, such as cutting off one's own limbs, seem excessively harsh or even cruel. That's understandable. But if you truly internalize the Dharma, some devoted disciples will do this. If you haven't deeply understood the Dharma, it's understandable that you can't accept such things. But once the Dharma truly enters your heart, some devoted disciples will do this. This is true for both Tibetan and Han Buddhism. Throughout history, many great masters have practiced austerities before their gurus. You can see this from their biographies. Their inner sense of confession is clear from their stories. Their deep sense of remorse, we are usually not like this. We don't even talk about using our body or life. Our confessions are often not very deep. As I just mentioned yesterday, if they're often just superficial or verbal, then our confession does not necessarily purify the negative karma in our mind stream. So we should reflect deeply. Each of us in this life has our own experiences and stories. Have we ever created negative karma in relation to these supreme objects? I think the answer is probably yes for most of us, especially for those of us who grew up in big cities in the past. We may not have known about the law of karma in Buddhism. If you don't know the true principle of karma, your life can easily drift away from the path of cause and effect. And in the process, you may have created countless negative actions, not to mention anything else, just killing sentient beings, from childhood until now, throughout all these years. The number of lives you have taken or had others kill, how many, probably is beyond calculation. So, having killed so many sentient beings, it's clear that we have accumulated a significant amount of negative karma. Not long ago, during a Dharma gathering, someone shared an experience. She said she was an obstetrician. Over the course of her career, she estimated she may have ended the lives of as many as 10,000 lives. Later, I thought about it. Perhaps this number includes not only her own actions, but also the cases she rejoiced in or encouraged others to do. All of this added together. And considering how many years she worked, it's hard to know the exact number, but she seemed aged, so it's possible that many lives were lost in her care. Truly, many lives may have ended at her hands. With this kind of karma, if it is not confessed, when will it ever be purified? Others have shared similar stories. One person told me he had run a restaurant for decades. During that time, countless sentient beings were killed every day for the business. Sometimes when you think about it, it's really striking. Some business owners on the surface may seem very successful. They appear wealthy and their businesses are thriving. Everything seems to be going well. But behind the scenes, many sentient beings have lost their lives as a result. So sometimes when I see some wealthy people, I wonder if their lives are really better than those of beggars on the street. A beggar just asks for food each day. And in fact, in Tibetan regions, many beggars recite Amitabha or Om Mani Padme Hum all the time. Because these beggars know that if they don't have the right attitude, people won't give them anything. But if they recite the Avalokiteshvara mantra or Amitabha's name, people are more likely to give them some money. Sometimes, when I see some major CEOs or big bosses in Han regions with millions or even billions in assets, to be honest, the negative karma they have created may be quite significant. Whereas some beggars in Tibetan regions just sleep on the street at night, their life seems quite happy, simple, and free. When they wake up in the morning, they have no worries and are quite content. So sometimes I wonder, who really has the better life, the beggar or the rich person? I myself am sometimes unsure. Maybe it's better to be a beggar. Who knows? This is something for each of you to consider for yourselves. So what we just discussed was the power of regret. Next is the power of support, which is explained in three aspects. These are the reason for taking refuge, the object of refuge, and how to take refuge. We talked about the object of refuge yesterday as well. We should rely on a support when we confess. So why do we rely on this? What kind of support do we rely on, and how do we rely on it? These are explained in three aspects. First, why do we take refuge in the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas? There is a brief explanation and a detailed one. First, the brief explanation. The verse says, I am going to perish quickly before I'm cleansed of my misdeeds. How can I be rescued from them? I beg you, please deliver me. The meaning here is, why do we need to confess? If we die with negative karma, unpurified, what's the problem? Some people might wonder about this. The author explains as follows, giving us further insight. Whether in this present life or in our future lives, if our negative karma is very heavy and serious, and if we don't purify it before death, if we don't confess and clear it, it's very possible that our life will end before we have a chance to confess. For example, if I have killed many sentient beings or committed various negative actions in this life, but never got around to confessing, always thinking, I'll confess later, I'll practice later, and if I die before I have a chance to confess these misdeeds, then I will remain in samsara, unable to attain liberation. As it says in the 400 verses, for ordinary people, negative karma is often very heavy, and most will fall to lower realms. If we die unexpectedly before we have a chance to confess, we will inevitably fall into the lower realms and will not be able to attain liberation. This is why I feel a sense of urgency. My heart is filled with anxiety and concern. So I should confess as soon as possible before the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. I want to confess as quickly as I can without any delay, using every moment I have. I also pray to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, please, as quickly as possible, bless and protect me and help me on this path. Please don't let me fall into the lower realms. Once we fall into the lower realms, it is extremely difficult to escape suffering. So here, at this moment, it's best if we can purify the negative karma in our mind stream first, before anything else. Not long ago, during the Dharma assembly, I also mentioned we recited the Vajrasattva mantra 400,000 times. Everyone should recite it diligently and sincerely. If you pass away before finishing this confession, there will certainly be a lot of negative karma in your mind stream. This negative karma will continue to follow you wherever you go, and at that point, whether you can attain liberation in your next life is very uncertain. For each of us, this is a real challenge. So before we die, we should do our best to purify the negative karma in our mind stream. I have always aspired and hoped for purifying all my negativities before death. But whether I will succeed is hard to say. I often think if I live long enough, if I have a little more time in my later years, I would like to spend 2 or 3 years in a quiet place, dedicating myself to confession and to observing my own mind. Even though I have been a monastic for a long time and have taught the Dharma and engaged in hearing, contemplation and meditation for many years, this period of time is actually quite long, but the time I've spent truly reciting confession texts, observing my mind and practicing the 4 powers has not been much. I really wish I could set aside some time to focus on confession practice, but of course it's hard to say for sure, because human life is unpredictable. Our lifespan can end very suddenly. We never know when the Lord of Death will come for us. No one can say for sure. If the negative karma in our mind stream is not purified, we'll definitely experience the results of those actions, either physically or mentally, which would be extremely difficult to bear and truly terrifying to experience. In the Sutra of the Wise and the Foolish, which we studied before, there is a story from the time of Buddha Krakuchanda. A man embezzled property belonging to the Sangha, and he passed away before he had a chance to confess. He also used harsh words to insult others. Later, this person passed away without having the chance to confess. After he died without confessing, he was reborn as a particularly ugly and strange fish. For lifetime after lifetime, he was reborn in filthy, foul places, suffering greatly. Even when the 1,000 Buddhas of the fortunate eon appeared in this world, this being was still unable to attain liberation. Even now, he continues to wander in such states. He continues to be reborn in these unfortunate realms. If he had confessed in time, he would not have been reborn in such a state, life after life. So, I think all of us here should reflect deeply on this. Each of us has to consider our own future and think carefully about what lies ahead. Aside from animals like yaks, which have little intelligence to discern, what will we become in the future? What hope do we have? I think everyone has wondered about this. If you have, then look at whether you have created negative karma. If you have, is it worth confessing? If you haven't confessed and death comes suddenly, will you be able to attain liberation? Even you yourselves can't be sure. So, for many people, if you have time and can confess later in life, you may feel a sense of peace and relief. Even if you haven't achieved great realization in your practice, at least you have recited confession texts and some mantras. You can feel that your negative karma has been greatly reduced. This is a thought that brings some comfort and reassurance to the mind. So I think studying the Dharma should be done with sincerity, not just on the surface and not just as an external ritual. No matter how elaborate the ceremony, it may not necessarily bring great benefit. What really matters is what kind of change happens in your own heart. Only then is the Dharma truly beneficial for you, and you can really feel its help in your life. That's what the Dharma is about. It should be helpful for each of us, bringing some benefit and positive change to everyone. And that help should be a change in your own mind stream. It's from this perspective of inner transformation that we understand the benefit. Now let's expand on the reason for taking refuge that was just mentioned. In the detailed explanation, we reflect on the swiftness of death to give rise to the mind of refuge. We reflect on the fear and uncertainty of death to give rise to the mind of refuge. This is explained in two parts. The first one is that we must reflect and truly generate the wish to take refuge in the three jewels. Before taking refuge, we should also generate the intention to confess. This is explained both briefly and in detail in three aspects. First, the brief explanation. Above, we have already touched upon the concept of taking refuge. Taking refuge is the power of support. In fact, this concept of the power of support also exists in Han Buddhism. For example, in the confession practices composed by Master Baizhang, there are 3 methods of confession and 7 types of attitudes for confession. First, among the 3 methods, he taught confession by ritual, by sign, and by non-arising. Confession by ritual means visualizing the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and lineage gurus, and confessing before them. This is called confession by ritual. What is confession by sign? It is essentially the same as the power of regret we discussed earlier, reflecting on your own mind and the negative karma you have created, and generating deep remorse. This is confession by sign. Confession by non-arising means feeling a sense of shame for your negative actions, and after making a vow, resolving not to commit any more negative actions. So these 3 methods are actually very much in line with the 4 powers. They are quite compatible. When it comes to the 7 types of mental states, for example, sense of shame, fear, disillusionment, bodhicitta, equanimity, and so on, these are the 7 mental states. Confession can be done with these 7 mental states. So, in summary, when we speak briefly, everyone should understand that the power of support among the 4 powers is essential. Let's look at the next verse together. The Lord of Death, untrustworthy, won't tarry for what's done or undone. So no one, whether or not they're ill, should place their trust in fleeting life. The Lord of Death is truly not someone we can rely on. Death is not something we can trust. He will not wait for your negative karma to be purified. Whether you are sick or not, human life is fragile and unreliable, and our time in this world is very uncertain. We all know that the Lord of Death can arrive suddenly. As His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche said in Heart Essence, my heart's advice. It is also explained this way. Our great enemy, the Lord of Death, arrives like lightning from the sky, and nobody can predict when and where he will strike next. In other words, death is as unpredictable as a sudden clap of thunder. No one knows when it will strike. No one can say for sure. We truly have no idea when our own life will come to an end. Some people might wonder, why do we need to be in such a hurry? Why do we need to confess or practice so urgently? But in reality, when it comes to Dharma practice, the sooner the better. If you keep putting it off, thinking there's always time, you never know when the Lord of Death will suddenly appear before you. And the Lord of Death certainly won't wait for you to finish everything. He won't wait until all your negative karma is purified, until your practice is complete and you have fully accomplished your path, or until you've wrapped up all your affairs in life. Death can come at any moment without warning and take you away. There's no guarantee. Death can arrive suddenly at any time, and when that moment comes, you have no choice but to face the results of your own actions. We can see this all around us in real life. Some people pass away after a long illness, while others, who seem perfectly healthy with no sign of illness at all, also die suddenly without any warning or any sign beforehand. As Nagarjuna says in the letter to a friend, our life is like a bubble blown by the wind on water, fragile and fleeting. Or, as the precious Garland puts it, our life is like a lamp flame flickering in the wind, a candle about to go out. We never know when this life will end or when we'll lose this opportunity. No one can predict it. No one can say for sure. Sometimes people pass away while in the middle of a conversation. Sometimes after a long illness in bed, people also pass away in this way. But for most people, death comes unexpectedly without any warning at all. So if we keep postponing confession, always thinking, I'll do it later, I'll do it someday, many people in cities often say, I don't have time to practice or to confess now, my life is too busy at the moment. I'll practice after I retire, when I have more free time. But even after retirement, they think, I'll wait until my children are grown and married, then I'll practice. Or after they leave home, then I'll practice. People keep postponing again and again, always putting it off for later. And in the end, when will you actually practice? When will you really start? So in our mind stream, in our hearts, we really need a sense of urgency, a feeling that we can't wait any longer. Without this sense of urgency, impermanence is truly frightening. We never know when we will die. As the saying goes, who knows if we will die tomorrow? Today we must practice diligently. This teaching is also found in the chapter on causes and conditions. So for all of us here, a year from now, who can say for sure if we'll still be in this world? No one can guarantee it. Death can come suddenly and unexpectedly. Not long ago, when there was an earthquake in Indonesia, it was 5 in the morning. People were still sleeping, dreaming peacefully, and then suddenly the earthquake struck, catching everyone by surprise. More than 5,000 people lost their lives in an instant. We always think, or we often feel, we'll still live for a long time. Some people who are ill may think maybe the sick will die, but healthy people won't. There's a Tibetan saying, in the eyes of a sick person, 100 healthy people will die first, because the sick person keeps waiting but never seems to die. And yet, one by one, others pass away before them. In the end, many healthy people will have died before them. Life is truly fragile. Sometimes it can end in an instant, whether you're traveling or just sleeping. There are so many possible causes of death, so many different conditions that can arise unexpectedly. Just a few days ago, some road workers near Sirta, while working on the road, one worker was dumping dirt into the river, just doing his job as usual, and accidentally fell in with the dirt, losing his life in a moment. All the workers searched along the riverbank for his body. When asked, they said he fell in with the dirt and that's how he passed away. Who can say what kind of causes and conditions led to that? Sometimes as we're walking, one moment we're alive in the world, but the next we could already be in the bardo stage. It really can happen that quickly. So as practitioners, it's best not to delay our practice. Don't think, I'll practice or confess next year, or I'll confess when I'm old. I'll wait until later in life to do it. I'll focus on my work and career for now. If you keep thinking like this, it's really not the approach of a true practitioner. We really need to practice and reflect right away. Don't keep putting it off. If you keep postponing, your practice is unlikely to succeed. So in the brief explanation, this is how it's taught. Let's continue with the next verse. It says, I must leave all behind and go, but I have not yet recognized that. For the sake of those I like or dislike, I have done various misdeeds. Because of our ignorance, our mind streams are often clouded by ignorance and confusion, and we don't realize how fragile life really is. When it comes to matter of life and death, many people are simply unaware. They don't understand the true nature of it at all. At the time of death, all your loved ones, all your possessions, wealth, status, and fame must be left behind. Everything, including reputation and position, will be left behind. Even a great master with 100,000 followers, not a single disciple can be taken to the next life. It's like pulling a hair out of butter. Nothing sticks. When we leave this world, we go alone. Nothing and no one can come with us. When the time comes for us to depart from this world, we go by ourselves with no one and nothing to accompany us. People in the world, when we observe carefully, we see how confused they can be. Do we know how long we'll live? Yet every day we're busy with our lives, our careers, our reputation, our status, always striving. But when we look back, what real benefit have we gained? Some people are always trying to accumulate wealth, and others are always seeking status. Sometimes the way people act in the world is almost like a kind of madness. It's all ultimately meaningless, but they just don't realize it. They don't know what their life is really about. When you leave this world, only the good deeds and positive karma you have created will truly help you. All the other things you chase after are ultimately meaningless and bring no real benefit. And if during your life you have created a lot of negative karma, how will your future lives be pure? What kind of results will you experience? Most people never even think about this. So, for those who have faith in Buddhism, I think it's truly fortunate, because you already understand these truths. You know that most worldly pursuits are ultimately meaningless. But most people who don't have faith in Buddhism have no idea about these things. They still think their own views are absolutely correct. When they see people practicing Buddhism, they think those people are the ones with problems. That's how they see it. But I think when it comes to Buddhist teachings, of course, it's your choice whether to accept them or not, but it's worth taking a closer look. Consider whether these teachings have a logical basis. If not, do you have any sound reasoning to refute them? Are you able to do so? If you can't refute them, then you might have to admit there's something to the Buddhist view. When we die, we have to leave everything in this world behind. In this brief and impermanent life, we often generate jealousy, anger, desire, and other negative emotions for the sake of our loved ones and friends. We give rise to countless afflictions for ourselves and our loved ones, and try to eliminate our enemies, what we call protecting relatives, and eliminating enemies to protect our loved ones and harm our enemies. We create countless negative actions. Indeed, in this human life, while we are alive, many people create negative karma for the sake of their loved ones. Some people feel deep kindness for their loved ones, while others, out of attachment, develop jealousy and negative emotions. Jealousy, too, can lead to very serious negative karma. If it's not confessed, it can quickly lead to rebirth as an animal. In the past, the Emperor Liang's repentance, known as the King of Confession texts in Han Buddhism, has its origins in a story like this. Emperor Liang's empress was frequently overcome by jealousy toward the other concubines in the palace. After she died, Emperor Liang was deeply saddened. One night, a particularly ugly python appeared in the rafters of the palace. The snake spoke in a human voice, saying, "When I was in the palace, I felt intense jealousy toward the other women. Now I have been reborn as this animal. The suffering I experience now is extremely intense and painful. Can you please find a way to help me escape this unfortunate state?" After saying these words, the snake disappeared. When the snake was gone, Emperor Liang, who was a powerful and influential ruler, as everyone knows, gathered great masters from all directions, such as Master Baoji and others. He asked them to compile a text, a confession text, which ended up being 10 volumes long. Today, this is a highly respected confession text among many monastics and lay practitioners in Han Buddhism. After they compiled this confession text, one day, a celestial being appeared before Emperor Liang, expressing deep gratitude. She said, "I have now left the animal realm and have been reborn in the heavens." Since then, this confession text has been held in the highest regard in Han Buddhism, so we should sincerely rely on such confession texts to purify our misdeeds. Otherwise, if we pass away before having a chance to confess, even the jealousy we may have felt toward our Vajra brothers and sisters or anyone else, its retribution can be very harmful if left unconfessed. In the Wei dynasty, there was a man named Du Chang, whose wife was also extremely jealous. One day, a maid was combing Du Chang's hair, and while she was doing this, his wife, seeing this, became very upset and jealous. She immediately cut off the maid's finger. A few days later, her own finger was bitten off by a fox, as if it were karmic retribution. She suffered great pain. Sometime later, her husband listened to another maid singing, and she sang very well, and once again the wife became jealous. She immediately cut off the maid's tongue, and the maid suffered greatly. Soon after, her own tongue started to decay and rot away. She suffered terribly and realized something was wrong. She invited some Chan masters to recite sutras for her, and she recited scriptures and repented for 7 days and nights. After 7 days and nights, the Chan master continuously recited mantras and confession texts for her. During the recitation, 2 poisonous snakes emerged from her mouth. The faster the master recited, the faster the snakes came out. Finally, the 2 snakes emerged and fell to the ground, then vanished. After that, her tongue was miraculously restored and healed completely. There are many such accounts in Han Buddhist history showing how karma can ripen in this very lifetime. From these stories, we can see that negative karma created toward our loved ones is not uncommon. And of course, negative karma created toward those we dislike is even more common. We often give rise to anger toward others, and the afflictions we feel toward our enemies are many. So it's important to remember that at the time of death, none of this will be of any use. In fact, these things can become obstacles to your practice and liberation and are worth confessing. Now, in the more detailed explanation, it's taught as follows. These 2 points are actually related and are best explained together. Those I don't like will cease to be, and those I like will cease to be. I myself will cease to be, and everyone will cease to be. This means, as we discussed earlier, whether it's enemies or loved ones, including our own life after death, nothing remains. So while we are alive, we shouldn't let these things trouble us so much. Also, we shouldn't create all sorts of negative karma for the sake of these temporary concerns. These days, people really do create a lot of negative karma for the sake of their children, family, and friends. And to defeat their enemies, they also create a lot of negative karma. But if you really look at it, especially from the Buddhist perspective, so-called enemies after a while will also fade from our lives. Some may have already left this world, or some may not even be your enemies anymore. Sometimes they become your friends, and all enemies eventually disappear, vanish with time. They simply cease to exist and become nothing in the end. At a certain point, those enemies are just gone. All our friends and loved ones at this moment, even if the relationship is very close for a time, no matter how close or loving it seems, whether they are relatives or dharma friends, worldly friends or classmates, at some point the closeness may fade, and in the end everyone goes their own way. All these people will eventually part ways with us. So in the end, all friends and loved ones are like smoke and ashes, nothing remains. In the end, everything disappears, nothing is left. At the same time, our own body, something we are so attached to, will also perish one day as we will die soon. At the time of death, is there anything worth being attached to or angry about? There is no exception to this. No matter who you are, no matter how much fame or influence you have, when you die, your body is probably dealt with in a day, and within a few hours all the funeral arrangements are finished. After that, nothing remains. Sometimes when we look at the world, no matter who they are, celebrities, actors, singers, after they die, their bodies are soon dealt with just like anyone else. For a few days, the news may report on it, and it might be a big story for a short time, but the attention fades, and soon everything is forgotten. That's just how it is when someone dies. But in fact, the karma we create for our loved ones, good or bad, will follow us like a shadow, always stay with us, never leaving us for a moment. So we should understand that while we are alive, it's important to confess our negative karma before the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. This is very important. So while we are alive, we shouldn't create negative karma for the sake of our loved ones. For the sake of yourself or others, do not commit unwholesome actions. If you do, you will have to bear the results yourself. For them, your sacrifice doesn't bring any real help, because the nature of samsara is impermanence. Everything is always changing. The Bodhicharyavatara is truly a very rich text. It teaches about impermanence, the preciousness of human life, samsara, and karma. All the basic teachings of Buddhism are included. Sometimes I think if you study the Bodhicharyavatara well, whether it's Mahayana or Hinayana, you will have a solid foundation in all Buddhist teachings. So it's best to understand the teachings of the Bodhicharyavatara, the basic knowledge of Buddhism. Well, for many people, this might be very difficult to achieve. In Tibetan Buddhism, it's often said, oh, if someone wants to become a monastic, they should first study the words of my perfect teacher and the Bodhicharyavatara. Why? Because these texts are so comprehensive. If you really understand these teachings, if you can fully grasp these points, you will become a truly good practitioner. So this time of studying together is a wonderful opportunity. I hope you won't just keep these teachings at the level of words, but really reflect on each point and examine them carefully. People in the world today are often so preoccupied, always observing, discussing, and analyzing all sorts of external things, mainly focusing on the material aspect. But when it comes to their own inner life, their own life and death, their own motivation, almost no one reflects or investigates these things. This is really unfortunate. As Mahayana practitioners, we should observe not only the world and its knowledge, but also look within and examine our own minds and hearts. We can understand worldly knowledge, but most importantly, we must not forget the most crucial thing. Life is very short, and we should be prepared. If I were to die tomorrow, has my negative karma been reduced? Have I truly confessed? Have I practiced well, whether it's Dzogchen, Mahamudra, or meditation? Have I really put effort into these practices? Have I truly cared about bodhicitta and renunciation in my mind stream? Some Dharma teachers, when they teach, just mention the theories of renunciation and bodhicitta, but don't actually give any practical guidance on how to cultivate them. That's not enough. Just talking about renunciation and bodhicitta won't solve the real problem. Let's stop here for today.
손은 대이 단체 들어가냐 돈은 입에 장난 다시 길가나 지라노 출발 주변 손은 좋아져
만드는 거를 만나서들도 만드는 거를 만나서도 만드는 거를 만나서들도